For this next video, we will be going over how to detail erection views and detail our members. Before the training in our Intro to Drawing editor, we did detail an anchor bolt plan. So we did go through some of the settings for our detail erection views. We'll go over them again and show you how to detail a couple more erection views, and then we'll move on to detailing our members and such. First, before we get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one last erection view drawing, and it's going to be an isometric view. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a plan view, which I'm already in. So if you're not, you can go to like your second floor, or if you want to just go to a plan view and type in an elevation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate around, and then I'm going to turn off my depth check, and then I'm going to rotate around the model to see how I would like to save this view. So this, again, this is just going to be an isometric view. So however you want to see this isometric is you're going to have to rotate your model to how you want to see it. So right there, I think that looks good for me. I'm going to go ahead and come up to my layout page in my views grid section, and I'm going to save view as. And now we can save this current view as to how we have it. So I'm going to name mine ISO. I'm going to put a star in front of it. So it's going to be star ISO. And then I'm going to leave it as a primary. I'm not going to change any colors. I'm going to mark it for detailing and then say OK, just like the other ones. And now when I come up to my open folder, the reason I put a star in front of it is because now that it has a star in front of it, it's always going to default to be the first one in the list. So otherwise, if we would have just named it ISO or isometric, it would have fell somewhere down here because it's in alphabetical order. Now that it has that star in front of it, it's always going to be at the top of the list. It's something that I like to do for my isometrics. If you have a whole bunch of plan views in here, you don't want to have to go through and search for your ISO. You just want that to be your first one. That's a good practice that I like to do. You don't have to, completely up to you. So now we can switch back between these views. If I go to my second floor plan, that's what that is, and I can go back to that ISO, and it's going to give me that look right here. So what I'm going to do, since we've created this view, is we're going to detail this erection view. So to detail an erection view, what you'll have to do in your modeling is have to go to your drawings page, and under the placement section, this little T-square with the camera icon is our detail erection views. So I'll click on that, and it's going to bring us to our select erection view. Now, if you don't see any views inside of here, you may want to check your filter. If show for detailing is checked off, you may not see any in there, and because we created all of our views to save to show for detailing, that's why they're going to be placed in this list. So now what we can do, when we did take a look at the settings when we created our anchor bolt plan erection view. So what we did is we selected this and we went over here to settings. I'm going to do the same exact thing for my ISO view. I'm going to highlight that, and then I'm going to click on my settings to bring my settings up. And what we're going to do here is we're going to change a couple things. We did go through this window already, so this should look familiar. You can change if you want to view your steel member style, if you want to view that as stick, wire, solid, stick and wire, or stick and solid. I want to actually view mine as wire. So I'm going to set mine to wire. And then what we're going to do for this erection view is we're going to set a status display. And I'm going to kind of show you how we want to set that up. So I'm going to check this box on. And once I check that box on, it says we can define the status. So I'm going to click on define status, and the status display window will open up. Now I want to set the status display up how we viewed our sequences in the last video. So if you remember how I set that up, that's what I'm going to do here now. So I'm going to have 4 different priorities. For this first one, I'm just going to get it set up. I'm going to change my color. I'm going to go green for my color, and then I want to show by sequence. So I'm going to select my general status options and then pick sequence. And then my first priority is going to be my sequence 1A. So now that I have this set up, I can come over here and I'm just going to click this plus button 3 more times to get a total quantity of 4 priorities. And now all I have to do is come through to each priority, change the color, and change the sequence. So for my priority 2, I want a different sequence to show as a different color. So I'm going to pick cyan, and that'll be my sequence 2A. So I can browse for my sequence 2A. Priority 3, I want as magenta, and I can browse for sequence 3A. And then for priority 4, let's change that to orange. And I'm going to browse for my sequence 4A. And I'm going to say OK. And then once we have our priority set up with our different colors and different sequences, I'm just going to go ahead and say OK to this window. And now we can continue to go through here. For annotations, we can specify if we want to remove drawing annotations. Since this detail or this erection view hasn't been detailed before, we're not going to worry about that. This isn't our anchor bolt plan, so we're not going to have that checked on like we did last time. I'm actually going to leave everything the same here. And then our piece marks tab, we only have a few options there. I'm going to leave that set. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say OK. So the only things we've changed for this ISO view is the steel member style and our set status display, and then we defined our statuses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say OK, and then we still have to detail this. We were just in the settings here, so with that selected, I'm going to just say OK again, and it's going to go through and it's going to create that erection view for us. So once that's done, we can say OK. Now the one thing I wanted to point out with this is if we go back to our detail erection views, if I click on another erection view, so let's just click on A for example. If I go back into the settings, they have reset to the default settings. So this steel member style, even though I changed that last one to wire, it is still set to stick. We don't have the status display criteria on. These are all the default options that it's always going to give you to begin with. And there is a way that we can change that, so I'm going to show you that right now. I'll just cancel out of this window, and I'll cancel out of this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to our home screen. So I'm going to minimize out of modeling. And once we're at our home screen for SDS2, we can go to our project settings. And within our fabricator settings, it'll be under detailing. And then we'll want to open up our detail erection view defaults tab. So it'll be this one right here. And this window that we're used to seeing will pop up for our detail erection view defaults. So now we can have the ability to specify any of the defaults that we may want to change. So if we want to detail our erection views and we always want our steel member styles to be in wire form, this is where we would want to change that so that we wouldn't have to go in and pick a detail erection view and go and change the settings for each one. This will control the settings for all of them since these are the defaults. Now since we did go through and we did take a look at this previously, I'm just going to go ahead and cancel out of this window, and I'm going to actually go back to my model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my detail erection views, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to detail the rest of my erection views since my settings are the way that I want them to be set up. So now we could detail more than one at a time. What we can do is we could either click and drag our mouse down to be able to select all of the different ones that we want to detail. And then since I got the anchor bolt plan selected, what I can do is I can hit Control on my keyboard and just single click that. And now we can see all of our selection is selected. Another thing I can do is I could come over here to the Select All button, and then again I can Control on my keyboard and single click the ones that I don't want selected. Or if I want to just select one by one, I can select this one, hit Control on my keyboard, and just single select all of them like this. However you want to do it, it's up to you. And then, like I said, I'm not going to change any of the settings for any of these. We could go in and change the settings this way. So let's say if we wanted A, B, C, D, and E to only show and stick, we could go ahead and say OK, and we could say OK with only those selected. And it's going to go through and it's going to detail those erection views. Could say OK. And then when we go back, let's say we want the rest of these to be shown in wire form. You can go ahead and say OK, and then say OK, and now it's going to detail the rest of those in wire form. So that's going to tell me when it's done. I'll say OK. Now there's a couple different ways we can get into Drawing Editor. One way is from our home screen. So if we open up our home screen again, we can come down here to this little T-square right here, and that's going to launch Drawing Editor. Or if you don't want to go back to your home screen, what you can do is there is a T-square button within our drawings page here. So this will also launch Drawing Editor. So I can just click on that, and it's going to open up a Drawing Editor window for us. And now what we can do is we can open up one of those erection views that we've detailed. So it wants us to select one piece mark to open. Well, we don't have any details for our member details. This is where our member details would live. So we need to select what we want to pick. In this case, it's erection view. So I want to hit the radio button for erection views. And now we can see these are all of our views that have been detailed. So let's go ahead and view the ISO one, since that's the one we made our changes to and set our status display for. So I can either double click on that or select that one and say OK. And now we can see that this did go through and it detailed out all of our different members in wire form, and it's showing us our different colors because we set up our status displays to do so. So now what we can do from here is we can take a look at how to kind of clean up some of these erection view drawings. If we wanted to only show, let's say, if we zoom in up here, we can see that some of these section sizes and some of these piece marks are kind of in the way. They kind of make it look jumbled and they're crisscrossing each other and stuff like that. Well, let's say we just wanted to maybe use this ISO as like a cover page or something like that. So we only want to see the members and we don't want to see any of the other labels. Well, there's a pretty quick way to do that. And what we can do is we can come up to our drawings page, and within our placement section here, we do have a erection view clean several. This is our erection view clean by location. We have the third one down is the EVU cleanup by piece marks, or the EVU cleanup by member numbers. So we'll just go through this one by one. Let's start in the EVU cleanup LOC or by location. So what this is going to do is it wants me to select a member to be able to edit. So let's go ahead and let's just select this member here. So if I left click there, it is going to open up our erection view cleanup window. And then within here is where we could come in and we can specify where we want to see some of these different piece marks or section sizes. In this case, what I want to do is I want to turn off my piece mark and my section size because I don't want to see it. If I hit apply here and I say OK, and now we can see for this column, it doesn't have any piece mark or section size. So if we wanted to do that for each location, we could go through and do that. We could click on this column and then we could click on this beam up here. That might take a lot of time. That'll be really time consuming. So there's a couple better ways that we could do that. If you wanted to do it for only a couple members, that would be a good way to do it. There is another option for erection view cleanup by piece mark. So if I choose that one, What this will allow us to do is it'll choose by piece mark. So let's just say we had an erection view where the beams weren't really necessary to see any piece mark or section sizes. So what I could do is I could come through here and I could highlight any of my piece marks that start with B. So I could start over here and I could just highlight all of these beam piece marks and I could say OK. Now what it's going to do is it's going to pull up the erection view cleanup for all of those piece marks. And then at this time, I could come in through here and change any settings I want to about that. So let's say we don't want to see the piece mark and we don't want to see the section size. What I can do is I can apply that and I can say OK. And now you can see that none of our beams have any piece marks or section sizes on them. All we see is the columns, the vertical braces. We got a stair piece mark. So that is another way to be able to edit some piece marks and section sizes in your erection view cleanup mode. The last one would be by member numbers, so it's kind of the same thing. If you knew the member numbers and not the piece marks, you could select them in that way and do the same thing. So I could select all here, say OK, and I could, once this opens up, I could uncheck piece mark and uncheck section size and apply that and say OK. And now we don't see any piece marks or section sizes for any of our members. And lastly, we have our erection view clean up several. So if I show you this, this is going to be another way to be able to show certain things. So what I could do is I could come down here, like let's say for piece marks, for example, I could click on this visibility so I could hide the item, I could show the item, or toggle show hide. If I wanted to do that for section sizes, I could do that for section sizes if I wanted to, let's just say, show the item, and then I could select and I could have a whole bunch of different things that I could select and show here. In this case, I don't really want to change anything. I want to be able to not see any of my piece marks or section sizes. It's just another way to go through and be able to set that. So I'm going to exit out of that. And now this erection view is how I want to see that. So I'm going to go back to my drafting page. And another thing we can do to view some of our other erection views is we can either use these arrows. So this is the next drawing, or this would be to the right. So if I click on this, since I made changes to this erection view, it's going to ask me if I want to save. I want to say yes. And once I say yes, it's going to automatically open up the next erection view in the list, which happens to be A. If I want to go back to that other one, I can click the previous drawing, or the left, and it's going to go back to that erection view. Another thing that you can do to toggle through each of your erection view drawings is use your arrows on your keyboard. So that's what the keyboard shortcuts are. If you click right on your keyboard, you can just simply go through all of your erection views that have been detailed. So you can see the mezzanine plan. All of these other ones were the ones that I detailed in stick form. And the mezzanine plan, roof framing plan, and the second floor framing plan are all detailed in wire form. And you can keep going through here and see all of the different sections that we've detailed. Once you get at your last drawing, if you try to hit the right, it'll alert you saying you're at your last drawing and you can't go any further. So you just have to say okay to this, and then you can go to your previous drawings. And again, you can go through here, and if you want to make any changes to any of your piece marks or section sizes, you could go through here and you could clean any of these drawings up as you see fit to make them look a little bit nicer, so that when you get them onto sheets, they fit and they look how you want them to look. And since we talked about labels and moving them and rotating them and such in the previous video, I will move on, and the next thing we will talk about is our member details. So we'll go through and detail some of our members in our model and show you how to scrub up those details. So from this point, what we can do is we can go ahead and we can just exit out of Drawing Editor. We'll have to close it back up. But what we want to do is we want to go back to our modeling window. And if you're not already on your drawings page, you'll need to go to your drawings page. And within the members section, this is where we'll want to choose our detail members. So it's the little T square with the square on top of it. So let's go ahead and click on that, and this will open up our select piece mark window. So it's going to look a little bit similar to what our erection view window did. It'll have all of our piece marks in the list here. So this is containing all 65 of our members in this model. And since none of them have been detailed before, all of them are going to be selected by default. Let's say if B14, for example, if B14 was detailed beforehand and we already had a detail created for it, if that member wasn't marked for detailing, it wouldn't show up as selected in this list. So this list is selecting all of the members in our model that are marked for detailing. So another thing that we can do here is we can click on our settings as well, and our member annotations and dimensioning settings will open up. So at the very top here, we have the option to preserve existing drawing annotations. We can either have that set to none, user created, all and ignore drawing piece marks, or all and update drawing piece marks. Since we haven't had any of these detailed, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to leave that set to none. We can detail using templates. Templates is going to be a way to customize how SDS2 creates our member details or submaterial details. Out of the box, the templates are just going to try and match the system detailing. So for this, we will not be using templates when we detail. It would be a little bit slower to detail when having templates turned on, but since this is just going to try to match what the system is going to give us, and we don't have any templates set up, we're not going to worry about having this option checked on. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and uncheck detail using templates. And then as you can see, the remove snap lines, verbose progress updates, and show applied templates are all grayed out since those three are all options dealing with using templates. Below that, we have a checkbox to dimension user created material. So do we want to dimension the user created material added on to any of these members? Do we want to dimension holes on user created material? We can use generated dimensions, use generated annotations, and use generated welds. Do we want to generate named locations? Do we want to show non-annotated system views? So what this checkbox would be is if you added a view for a member that didn't have any annotations or any dimensions on it, do we still want to show that view? And we'll take a look at adding views here in a little bit. We can preserve user modified BOM or bill of material. We can detail with revisions, and then do we want shortened drawings on? So with that checked on, all of our drawings will automatically be shortened for us, and we'll take a look at that here in a second too. So the only thing that we're going to do in this window is actually uncheck detail using templates, and then I'm going to go ahead and say OK here. So we do have some other buttons and options to look at here. We could either save a selection, load a selection. We could clear the selection. So if I hit clear here, it would just clear all of those that are highlighted. Or the select all button, it could select all of them. And then the settings box we just took a look at. Below that, we have our preserve system set detail flags. So what this would do is if this was ever checked off, it would basically tell the system to show, or basically tell the system to say, hey, I don't need to detail any of these members that have the detail flags on them. So I would recommend to keep this checked on unless you really know what you're using that for. You have an option to detail the bill of material only. So what this would do is it would update the bill of material, but it would not actually update the drawing itself. And then an option for submembers. Down below here we have a status display option. So if we wanted to save that status display that we set up for earlier and we wanted to load this in here for our details, we could do that here. And then we also have a hide option. So if I click on hide, we have a couple different options in here. We could hide by member type. So if we only wanted to detail certain types of members or certain types of materials, if we only wanted to detail members within a certain sequence or a zone, this is how we could do that here. And it would basically just update the list accordingly. We have some different routing definitions, which we won't really take a look at. And then our category and miscellaneous tab. So right now, by default, our special masking options. So right now, any members that are set to existing do not show up in this list to be detailed. Any members that are set detail complete don't show up. And then any members that have user created details would not show up in the list either. You could come in here and you could check on some different options. So if you had maybe a member on a sheet already, you could come and check this one on to say I don't want that one to show up in the list to be detailed. And there's a couple different other options in there as well. For now, we won't make any changes to this, so I'm just going to hit cancel. And then what I'm going to do, since we have all of them selected, is I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to let the system create all of our details for us. I'm going to go ahead and check on this checkbox that says close when done. So it's going to automatically close this window when it gets through detailing all of our members. So now that window is closed, we know that it's done detailing all of our members. Now what we can do is we can go into our drawing editor again and we can take a look at some of those member details. So again, if you want to go to your home screen, you can launch drawing editor that way, or I'm just going to launch it within my modeling window here. So I'm going to hit the T square and it's going to open up another drawing editor window. And now when this window pops up, it's going to have all of our piece marks showing here in this list, because by default it is set to show our details. So just like how we can filter out our erection views, we can come up here to details and we can just select one to open. So I'll open up B14 and it's going to show us the details that are automatically created for our beams. And again, if I wanted to use my left and right buttons, I could just hit my right button and go through all of my different details. So these are all my beams. I'll go through these quickly here. Let's see if we can find a column here. So here's one of our columns. Here's our column C1. So these details look a little bit different. It's got a little bit more views on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a detail that we can take a look at, for example, and just try to change some things about it. So it doesn't really matter which one we choose here. Let's go ahead and let's just choose this one, for example. So one thing that I would always suggest that you do when you're editing dimensions or adding dimensions or whatever you're doing for your member details is to unshorten your drawings. So up here across the top, we have our ribbons like we do in our modeling window. Over here on the left side, we have our quick access toolbar. And then down here on the bottom is our static toolbar, like we're used to seeing. So it's going to show us our button bindings, our status line, and the current drawing that we have open, and then again our selection filter. So as we start to choose things, we'll see our quick access bar fill up. Up here in our drawing section, we have these two options right here. So this is our shortened drawing, and this one below it is our unshortened drawing, or it'll be DE on our keyboard. I'm just going to go ahead and unshorten this drawing to show you what it does here. And once I click that, you can see that it gives us the full length of this detail. So the reason you'll want to unshorten things when you're adding them is because you don't want to have to worry about making sure you have your 2 points picked correctly or whatever you're doing when you're adding it. So by doing it this way, you can go ahead and add any dimensions you want to, and then when you shorten it back up, SDS2 is going to shorten that accordingly, and it's going to make everything fit on the detail. So what we could do here is if we want to change any of these dimensions, for example, let's say this 102 dimension, what we could do is if we wanted to change anything about this, we could drag this. If we hit shift on our keyboard, is we could drag this So one thing I can do to update any of these dimensions is I can just come up here and I can simply click and drag. And then let's say if I wanted to go to a different point, it will auto snap to like a line that I want to choose or wherever I want to go. If I want to move just the label, what I could do is I could click on the label and I can drag this out and I can move this up and down as needed. Another thing I could do is if I don't want this label to be a part of this line, I can hit shift on my keyboard and I could drag this label and I could bring it, let's see, I could bring it wherever I really want to, and it wouldn't be a part of that line. It'll still be a part of that dimension, so I could still, like if I wanted to drag this down, you can see that it'll be a part of that dimension. It's just not a part of that line. But if I didn't want it like that, I could just select or hit shift on my keyboard and select that label and bring it back to the dimension line. And again, if I wanted to edit this, I could just grab any of these dimension lines and mark it as such. Now, some labels will not automatically update. So let's say our overall dimension labels, for example, if I would take this and I would move this, you can see as I'm moving that, none of those dimensions or anything are changing. So if I would just let it go right here, this text would actually be the same. That's all due to that being hard-coded into the system when the detail is generated. So there are some dimension labels that wouldn't update automatically. And also, Drawing Editor does have an undo button. So that is Control Z on your keyboard, or you can come up here and hit this arrow. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that move. So it automatically goes back to the point that was currently at. And now we'll take a look at adding some dimensions. So in our drafting page, in our annotations, what we can do is we can come up here and we can dimension add, or if we hit F3 on our keyboard, it's going to be our keyboard shortcut for our dimension add. And then it's going to bring us up our locate bar that we're used to seeing with our different snaps and modifiers. So from here, what we can do is we can just go through and we can pick some different points. Let's say I want to pick an overall dimension and I can drag this up and to locate that. So now I've picked my 2 points. To locate that, I can just left click again. And then if I want to locate another point, I can, let's say I had another line in here, I could locate, or maybe the halfway point, I could do that. I could just locate again, and then as you can see, it just keeps going. Now, if I want to actually return out of that and just have those two dimensions that I added, I could right click And once I right click, you can see it adds those dimensions. So I'm going to actually return out of that and I'm going to delete this. So let's just say I wanted to add an overall dimension. I could go into my dimension add, pick my 2 points. I'm going to pick my exact point there, pick my exact point there. I'm going to locate where I want that. So let's just put that right there underneath the top one. And now I'm going to right click. I don't want to add another one. I'm going to right click and you can see that that overall dimension still gets put in there. So once I return out of that to locate where that I want that dimension, I'm still in the dimension add. I can just right click again to get out of the command. There's a dimension add horizontal, add vertical. This right here would be our drag off dimension. So if I enter my drag off dimension, what I can do is I can select a side now for a dimension. So if I hover over any one of these lines here, or a side, let's say I want the entire dimension of this side right here. I can click on this, and now I can just drag this to wherever I want that to go. So if I want to drag this all the way up to the side over here, or over to the side, I can locate that there, and now that dimension will be there, and that'll be a drag off dimension. And these dimensions are editable like any of the other ones would be, so I can drag these, I can move this to where I want to go to. If I want to, say I picked the point wrong, I wanted to go to that line instead of this outside one. I can just drag it down to that line and it's going to automatically snap to the end of that line right there. So we have a couple more things up here that we can add in. Let's say if we wanted to add in a weld, for example, we could come through here and we could add in a weld. We could locate where we want this weld, and then we can come through here and we can set some different information through this, what type of weld we want, the size, the length, what our root face is. We have all of this for the arrow side and the other side as well, so whatever you want to specify there. Right now I'm going to cancel out of that. I don't want to add a weld here. We also have the ability to add a cloud, so that was under our annotations. This is a little cloud symbol here, or it's F7 on your keyboard. So I'm going to go ahead and locate that. Let's say we wanted to add cloud points. What this is going to do is it just wants you to pick your points here. So I could pick my points around the, let's say I want to cloud that whole thing up right there. Now I can return now that I have that there, and it's going to actually use a cloud to, say, locate this end of the beam, for example. I don't want a cloud on mine, so I'm just going to delete that. Another thing we can do here, since we've got a couple dimensions added here, is we can shorten this drawing back up. So instead of unshortened drawing, we could use SD or shortened drawing on our keyboard. And then what this is going to do is it's going to ask us to enter in a dimension for our X and Y axis, and it'll automatically give us the appropriate dimension. So if I just say okay to this here, it's going to take all of those details and say it can shorten it up by this amount. And then for our y-axis, it'll do the same. So it's going to recommend that we shorten this drawing up by this amount. And I'm going to say okay. And now we see this overall dimension. It is shortened up accordingly to our detail now. And then this one we added over here is shortened up in its axis as well. So now that we've made changes to this, what we could do is we could either go to the next drawing and it'll prompt us to save. So if I would say next drawing or previous drawing, it'll say this has been modified. Do you want to save changes? We could say yes or no. Now for the detail complete date and the detail frozen date, this is just asking you if you want to set dates for this. You don't actually want to set a date in here if you intend on coming back and modifying this detail or doing anything to this detail for that matter. This is just another way to be able to set a detail complete date and a detail frozen date. Another thing we can look at here is I'm just going to say yes. If I say yes, it's going to go to that previous detail here. So that's fine. We can look at this B65 detail. If we hit DD on our keyboard, so I hit DD on my keyboard, it's going to bring up our drawing data. So DD stands for drawing data. That'll be the shortcut. And in here, there's some other general things that you can set for this member detail. So this would be another way you could come in here and you could set your detail complete date, your sent for approval date, received approval, your detail frozen date, and then it'll give you some other basic information. So it'll give you your length and height for your actual drawing size. If you wanted to come in here and change the drawing scale for this drawing, you could come in here and change the scale for this. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cancel out of this, and we don't actually need to make any changes in there. And then the last thing is that we can bring up our bill of material for these details. So either by hitting BB on your keyboard, or you can come up here to your bill of material. You can actually see your bill of material and how it's shown for this detail, and it'll give you how your bill of material is set up. So it's going to give you a quantity total, it's going to give you a piece mark, it's going to give you a description column, a length, some different remarks, your weight total, if we had an advanced mill number, our quantity total, our weight in units, what our minor mark is, and then what our steel grade is. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. And the last thing I'm going to look at showing you is how we can add different views for our different member details. So we can use this B65 for example. Right now, the main view that we're seeing is the cross-section view for this member. To add a view, what we'd want to do is we'd want to go back to our model. So what I'm going to do is we can't actually put this B65 through redetailing because it is open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save any changes we made here, and I'm just going to go back or go to a different drawing. So now that we're at B64, what we can do is we can just minimize this drawing editor window and go back to our modeling window. And now what we could do is we can come in here and find our B65 member. So if we knew where that was, we could just zoom in and find it. In this case, I actually don't even know where B65 is, so I'm going to use my model tree. I'm going to expand my beams, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find my B65, expand that, and I'm going to highlight it here. Once we highlight it here, we can see that it is highlighted in our model, and our contextual ribbon will pop up since we have that member highlighted, and we'll have a couple different options through here. So within our drawing section on our contextual ribbon here, we do have an option to isolate member by location. Or you can press MI on your keyboard once you have a member selected. I'm going to go ahead and just press this button here. And what it's going to do is it's going to isolate that member, and it's going to show us what views that we have in here for this beam. So the main view that we have is the main view that it grabbed for us when it was detailed. So this is where your views come from when the detailing processes happen. So let's say we wanted to add a different view. Well, it's pretty easy. What we could do is we could either go in here to our preset, and in our preset view we have a couple different options we could check on. So let's say we wanted to have a top flange view. We could check on top flange view, and I could say okay, and now you can see a top flange view user created gets added to the list. Now we're still looking at the main view since that's the one that we have highlighted. If I double click on this top flange view, then it's going to automatically rotate around for us to be able to see that view. Now what we could do here is, if that's the only view we wanted to have in there, we could just hit OK here, and it's going to bring us back to the model of where we were looking at there. The other way that we could add a view is if we double click on that B65 member, so we could find our member, we could double click to open our beam edit window. And within our general settings, over here on the right side, we have a couple different buttons. So we could add a view, and that's the same window we just looked at. We could delete a view. So if we wanted to delete that top flange view that we just added in there, we could detail member, and then we could view the detail. So right now, another thing to take a look at is, because we made a change and because we added a view to this B65 member, it did get marked for detailing again. So this member has been flagged, and it says yes, it is marked for detailing. So the next time we try to view that detail or show that detail, it is going to ask us to redetail that view because it thinks that it's out of date and there's something that needs to be added to it. So whether we hit view detail here, it says this detail for this member may be added, date, detail now, question mark. I could say yes or no. I'm going to say no because I want to show a couple different ways we could get there. It is going to open up that view since I said no, and this isn't the redetailed view because we don't have a top view. If I exit out of that, I can cancel out of this. If I go to my drawings page in my members section and I go to my detail members again, when this list opens up, we can see that the only one that is highlighted here is the B65 member. And the reason that is because that's the only one that is marked for detailing. So the system knows that this is the one that's gone through the change. This member needs detailed again. So it's going to just automatically select that member for you. So what I could do now is I could say, okay, it's going to go through and it's going to redetail that member for us. And now what we can do is we can come back to our drawing editor and we can go back to that B65 detail. And now we can see that the top flange view is created there for us. And the very last way that we could talk about adding a view is if we wanted to create a section in this drawing editor view that we have here, we could do that as well and add like a section cut view. So if we wanted to come up here to in our drawing page, in our tools section, there is a section view. So I could select that, and what we're going to see first is it's going to tell us that this drawing is shortened. Continuing will automatically unshorten this detail. So if you hit continue here, it's going to unshorten our drawing again. And now we can select a view from which to cut the new view. So it wants us to select either this top view or this side view. I'm just going to select this one down here, and then we can draw our points. So let's just say I want to see a section cut view. I'm going to go from top down because I want to look to the right or to the east. My arrow populates, and I want to just see a section cut view that goes all the way through that beam. It's going to ask me what my depth limits are. That'll be fine for what I want to see here. I'm going to say OK. And then we can see it automatically creates a section cut view per where I drew that section cut line. And it gives us a section AA name. And then it wants me to place it. So I can place it over here. And then we can see it automatically gives us our section cut symbol. And then what we could do is we could shorten our drawing again. So we can go up to my shortened drawing icon, say OK, and say OK. And now we have some different views that are a part of this B65 beam. And then I could come over here if I wanted to, and I could add dimensions onto this section. In this case, I'm just going to leave it to where we have it here.